Talmud, page number
277. Page 277. We're starting a new paragraph on page 277 in our study of the Ein Yaakov. If you have this book, it's a lovely book to buy. It's an art scroll set from artscroll.com. And I'm glad to tell you, by the way, that we have just purchased a brand new set of art scroll Talmuds here. So we're going to have a second copy of every single copy of the Talmud. So from now on, in about a week or two, we'll be able to study Talmud in partners. So there's going to be 2 of every Talmud in this shul. If anybody would like to sponsor the second set, please let me know. But
more important than that, we need somebody to sponsor 2 more bookcases over here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have room for the second.
Okay, so we'll talk. But anyways, let's go further. We are learning the Talmud on page 277. This story we're about to learn, it's a story in the Talmud, which is actually quite a fundamental story. It's a story of a great shift that happened in the Academy of the Talmud, where they changed the rules of engagement. It used to be that people were very strict about who was allowed to study Torah. Take a look. It's a good story. A lot of references in the Talmud to the story, so it's pretty fundamental. The rabbis taught in a brayso that there was a story with a certain student who came before Rabbi Yehoshua, and he said to him, "My teacher," 278, my teacher, is praying the evening prayer, Ma'ariv. Is it optional or is it a requirement? Now, we've learned about this in our previous class. We learned that the first 2 of the daily prayers, morning and afternoon, are obligatory. And the question was if the evening prayer was obligatory. Because remember, there was two opinions as to what was the cause, the root of the daily prayers. If the root of the daily prayers was Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or if the root of the daily prayers was from the daily offerings in the temple, which were morning and afternoon. If it was the former, then Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are all equally important. All 3 prayers are equally important. But if it's the rooted in the offerings in the temple, the morning and afternoon offerings, then the evening offering was only a follow-up to the afternoon offering. It was like the leftovers, burning off the fats of the afternoon offering, and therefore the evening would be less important than the morning and the afternoon. So the question was posed to Rabbi Yeshua, is the evening prayer Ma'ariv, is it obligatory or is it optional? He told him it is optional. The student then came before the Nasi, Rabban Gamliel. This is the president, the Rebbe of the generation. And he asked the Rabban Gamliel the same question. He said to my teacher, is praying the Ma'ariv prayer optional or is it a requirement? Rabbi Gamliel replied, it's a requirement. It's obligatory. Okay. The student said to him, now this guy's shopping around his question, right?
Mhm.
So you're not supposed to do that, by the way. You're not supposed to do that. The student said to him, but Rabbi Yeshua told me that it's optional. Rabbi Gamliel said to him, wait until the shield bearers enter the Beis Medrash. Who are the shield bearers? These are the Torah scholars who battle each other like shield-bearing warriors. Wait until they enter the Beis Medrash, the house of study, and then you can ask your question again publicly. When the shield bearers entered, by the way, I want you to think of yourself as shield bearers. You know, we were just having a conversation before we went online over here about how we had a session last night that some people might have found offensive. Okay, good. So put on your battle armor and don't get offended. This is how we grow. This is how we learn. Because remember, God created us in his image. We don't create God in the image of the American Jew. We don't create God within our paradigms and comfort zones. God created us in his image. So if you feel challenged, you know what that means? That means you're growing. And because no growth happens inside of your comfort zones. Okay, so shield bearers entered and he asked, is praying the Ma'ariv prayer, the evening prayer, optional or is it a requirement? Rabbi Gamliel answered in front of everyone now the same answer that he said earlier. This is the Rebbe, the president of the academy. He said it is a requirement. Rabbi Gamliel then said to the assembled sages, is there anyone of dissent? Is there anyone in this room who disagrees with me on this matter? No, said Rabbi Yehoshua. Ooh. Rabbi Yehoshua was the one who was asked originally.
Yeah.
And he had said that it's optional. Now he's saying that he does not disagree, right? So he attempted to conceal the fact that he had ruled differently. Okay, Rabbi Gamliel said to him, but in your name they told me that you said that praying Ma'ariv, the evening prayer, is optional. Rabbi Gamliel said to him, Yehoshua, He called him Yeshua without even the rabbi title. Stand up on your feet and let them testify against you. Which means, let them testify that you contradicted my ruling. Let the guy who reported you testify publicly against you that you ruled opposite to me. I'm looking at note 10. Rabbi Gamliel's opinion that praying Ma'ariv is a requirement was well known. Thus, for Rabbi Yeshua to have ruled differently to a questioner was, to Rabbi Gamliel's opinion, tantamount to opposing the Nasi. He was rebelling against the Rebbe. Rabbi Yeshua, for his part, also understood how important it was for the Nasi's honor and authenticity to be upheld, and that's why he tried in public to conceal the fact that he disagreed with Rabbi Gamliel. When asked his opinion in private, however, he felt that he had the right and even the obligation to state the law as he saw it. So this is a bit of a sticky situation. This is politics rising in the academy, in the Talmudic academy. So again, Rabbi Yeshua was asked a question about Ma'ariv evening service. He said that it was optional. Then the same guy asked, this guy must have been looking to make trouble. The guy asking questions, right? So he then goes to Rabbi Gamliel, the president. He asks him, and he says it's a requirement, it's obligated. Then the guy says publicly, stirring the pot, right? So publicly, Rabbi Gamliel says it's a Ma'ariv is a requirement, it's obligatory. Does anybody disagree? Rabbi Yeshua says, I don't disagree. Then he says, but I heard that you do disagree. And then he says, let the guy come testify against you. Let's see what happens. But Rabbi Yeshua stood up on his feet and he said, if I were alive and the questioner were dead, the living could contradict the dead. In other words, I could deny that I ruled, then Ma'ariv is optional. I could have denied it. However, that I'm alive and he is alive, how can the living contradict the living? So in other words, I confess, yes, I did. I told the questioner that praying the Ma'ariv evening prayer is optional. Rabbi Gamliel did not respond to Rabbi Yeshua's admission, which was really insolence, insubordination, but simply began delivering his prepared lecture. Rabbi Gamliel continued sitting and lecturing, while Rabbi Yeshua, who had not been given permission to be seated, remained standing up on his feet. So remember, Rabbi Gamliel asked Rabbi Yeshua to stand before, and now he just continues talking without giving him permission to sit. This continued until all the people murmured in outrage over the disrespectful way that Rabbi Yeshua was being treated by who? By Rabbi Gamliel, the president. And they said to Chutzpis, who was the announcer of the lecture, Chutzpis was the Maturgman, he was the translator. He was one of the 10 people who were executed by the Romans, the 10 martyrs. When we read about them in your Musaf of Yom Kippur in the afternoon, after Yizkar, after everybody leaves, that's when we read about the 10 martyrs. Rabbi Chutzpis, the Maturgaman, was one of them. He was the translator. What happened was that the Rebbe, Rabbi Gamliel, would speak, and this guy was like the megaphone. He would sort of translate or explain or amplify. So they asked the announcer to stop announcing, and Chutzpis stopped. This effectively halted Rabbi Gamliel's lecture. It's like they turned off his microphone. Just an interesting side note over here. You know, when I published my book which is actually coming out of the new title now, we have just 7 books left available on Amazon. And if God is good, why can life be so bad? When I published my book, I didn't have the courage to actually call it the title that I wanted to call it. The title I wanted to call it was Why Bad Things Happen to Good People. That was the title. Now, I know you think that there's a book with that name. There is not a book with that name. The book, no. The book of that title, which you're thinking of, is not called Why Bad Things Happen to Good People. It's called When Bad Things Happen to Good People. Because that Reform rabbi wasn't addressing the question of why. He was talking about his experience. And he called it When Bad Things Happen to Good People. I can understand why he wouldn't want to do that, because it was audacious to take on that title. But I have to say that after the extraordinary feedback that I'm hearing from around the world consistently, people are deeply moved by it, and I think I'm ready to call it by that name. Anyways, God willing, why bad things happen to good people. Anyways, so now, and I'm calling it the manuscript. So it's not mine. It's from the manuscript, via Daita, right? So some of my colleagues criticized me in public, and we were actually on a bus on the way back from Kazakhstan, and when I distributed the book to my colleagues and they saw it, they're like, Rabbi Vigler, you have audacity. They said, who gave you the right to translate and teach Hasidus? These are my fellow Chabad rabbis. Who gave you the right to interpret the meaning of the words of our holy rebbes? So I looked at them and I said, listen, let me tell you something. So, there was a sage in the Talmud. His name was Rabbi Chutzpis, the translator, the sage of here. Rabbi Chutzpis, the translator. And I said, can you imagine what kind of mother would name her child Chutzpah? Can you imagine? What kind of mother would name her child? Vikar Reish may be Israel, and may his name be called in Israel. Chutzpah? Can you imagine the rabbi's like, what? Did I hear what you just said? Chutzpah? Imagine a child, the kid, the moment he learns how to talk, would be like relegated to a lifetime of therapy. My mother thinks I'm a chutzpah. Right? What kind of name is this? I asked my colleagues this question. And I said, look, I was on a bus with all these rabbis. And I said, no mother would ever give a child the name chutzpah. He had a real name like Yaakov or Moshe or Pinchas or Eliyahu. He had a real name. You know who called him chutzpah? It was his colleagues who called him chutzpah. Why? Because he was a translator. Because if you're going to translate, if you're going to teach, you're going to have the audacity to take a stand. They looked at me and they were like, wow, Rabbi Vigler, you've comforted us. So I got a special connection to this particular character here in the Talmud, Rabbi Chutzpis, the translator. This when I first published the second edition of my book, which was summer of 2022, I think it was. Okay, anyways. The story continues. So now what happens? There's a riot breaking out. The rabbi is giving his sermon. Everybody's seated. There's one guy standing. Rabbi Yeshua is standing, and people are very uncomfortable. They effectively ask the microphone to be turned off as the riot is rising. The people said, this is a very fundamental story in the Talmud, remember, so it's quoted many, many places in the Talmud. How long will Rabbi Gamliel go on causing pain to Rabbi Yeshua? He's humiliating Rabbi Yeshua. On Rosh Hashanah last year, he caused him pain. What did he do last year on Rosh Hashanah? Let's take a look at this incident in note 14. The people were referring to an incident recorded in the Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah and Tractate Rosh Hashanah, in which Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua disagreed as to the day that Rosh Hashanah fell out that year. According to Rabbi Yeshua, Rosh Hashanah fell out a day later than it did according to Rabbi Gamliel. It's an argument. When Rabbi Gamliel heard that Rabbi Yeshua disputed his decision, he ordered him to publicly demonstrate his acceptance of the Nasi's authority of Rabbi Gamliel by coming to him carrying his walking stick and money on the day that Rabbi Yeshua considered to be Yom Kippur, which according to Rabbi Yeshua's calculation would fall out a day later than according to Rabbi Gamliel. So you understand what happened? They had a disagreement about exactly what was the definition of the date of Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, right? For example, it's got to do with calculating the times. Just to give a modern day example of this problem. When the Jews escaped from the Holocaust, some Jews escaped eastward. They went to the Soviet Union. Some went all the way to China, and some of them made it to Japan. Some Jews made it to Kobe in Japan. Very interesting place. I was there when I was a teenager. So Kobe is an island off the mainland of Asia. So there was this huge debate at that time. This is what the Jews were arguing about during the Holocaust, about where the international dateline is. Now we know the dateline today is somewhere in the middle of nowhere, uninhabited land between like New Zealand and Hawaii, right? Like nobody goes there. It's like the Tochus of planet Earth, right? So that's where the dateline is. But there was a huge debate. There was one opinion who believed that the dateline goes hugging the eastern seaboard of the most eastern continent, which is Asia and Australia. Which means, therefore, that Japan is where? A day later or a day earlier, whichever way you're looking at it, right? A day off. So the students of that yeshiva, some of them were adherents of that particular opinion. I don't want to mention his name because we're not fans of this particular. I know the Rebbe was not a fan of this particular person. I'm not going to mention his name. And what happened was that some of those yeshiva students during the Holocaust in Japan, observing Yom Kippur, fasted for 48 hours. Now it's already a wartime. You can imagine they weren't exactly well nourished, right? And I think one of the students actually died from hunger. From what I understand, it's a little strange story, but I'm just saying that this idea that there's a debate about the date is not so unusual, right? Today we have a calendar. Thank God we have a calendar. right? Thank God, because I spoke about this on Shavuos. The only way to calculate the Jewish calendar is by use of the oral Torah. If you don't have the oral Torah, it's impossible to calculate the Jewish holidays and whatever else. So I'm just saying that there was a debate then between Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua, the head of the academy, and Rabbi Yeshua, and like there was a debate during the Holocaust about when is Yom Kippur. So Rabbi Gamliel insisted that there should not be a dissenting view. So he forced Rabbi Yeshua on the day that he said was Yom Kippur to come to him carrying his stick and his money, which would be a violation of Yom Kippur, in public, demonstrating his subordination to Rabbi Gamliel. Now what happened? The Rabbi Yeshua was sorely distressed by Rabbi Gamliel's order. He obeyed. Fine. So this was now the second time that Rabbi Gamliel was humiliating Rabbi Yeshua, and this was becoming a problem in the yeshiva. In the matter of the firstborn involving Rabbi Tzadok, he also caused him pain. This was the second time. What's the second time? Let's take a look in the notes. The Gemara in Brachos relates, Rabbi Tzadok, who was a Kohen, owned a Bechor, which is a firstborn male kosher animal, that he testified had become blemished unintentionally. The law is that a firstborn male kosher animal, a Bechor, must be given to a Kohen, who then brings it as an offering in the holy temple. If the Bechor accidentally develops a blemish, then the Kohen may slaughter it and eat it even outside the holy temple. Now the sages decreed that a Kohen is not believed to say that the blemish happened accidentally for fear that he might intentionally inflict a blemish and claim that it happened by accident. So here's what happened. The Kohen, Rabbi Tzadok here, claimed that he had received a Bechor, a firstborn kosher male animal that was donated to him, which he would have had offered as an offering in the temple. But now he claimed that it had unintentionally developed a blemish, which means that he's allowed to eat it inside of, he's allowed to eat it as a non-consecrated animal, which basically means he's just earned himself some cash. Now, Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua disagreed as to whether Rabbi Tzadok, who was a Talmud Chacham, a righteous sage, a Torah scholar, and therefore above any suspicion of lying, was believed to say that the blemish occurred unintentionally, or whether the sages did not differentiate in their decree, therefore any Kohen, even a sage, is not believed. So the question is, no Kohen is believed about saying that the blemish happened unintentionally, allowing him to have financial profits. The question is, do they grant an exception to this particular sage, Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen, right? So in that story, a similar sequence of events to the present one occurred, in which Rabbi Gamliel, when he found out that Rabbi Yeshua had ruled differently, then he went out delivering his lecture without giving Rabbi Yeshua permission to retake his seat. So again, he humiliated him publicly by forcing him to stand whilst everybody else was sitting. And now too, he's causing him pain. Come, let us remove him from the position of Nasi. They said we're going to strip him of his honor. This is a coup d'etat. They were trying to take down the president, the Rebbe, Rabban Gamliel. Take a look at note 16. Rabbi Gamliel's actions were not taken out of concern for his own honor, but rather because he considered strong use of the authority of Nasi necessary for the nation at that time. You got to have strong leadership, right? And if there's going to be a dissenting view, you know what's going to happen? There's going to be two religions. Can you imagine if two people observing Yom Kippur on two different dates? What's that going to look like? That's going to be a nightmare. In an early incident, Rabbi Gamliel had authorized that his brother-in-law, Rabbi Lezer, be excommunicated when he refused to accept the majority opinion of the Sanhedrin. At that time, Rabbi Gamliel had exclaimed to Hashem about his actions. He said, Master of the universe, it is revealed and known before you that I did not do this for my own honor, nor for the honor of my father's household, but rather for your honor, so that disputes do not increase in Israel. The majority of sages, however, were outraged at such humiliating treatment of the great sage Rabbi Yeshua, regardless of Rabbi Gamliel's motives. Now, Rabbi Gamliel was the most sensitive of people. The Gemara relates that once a woman in Rabbi Gamliel's neighborhood lost her son, she would weep continuously over him. In the stillness of the night, the sound of weeping wafted into Rabbi Gamliel's window, who would weep along until his eyelashes fell out. But when it came to the honor of the president, the office of the president, he felt that he had no choice but to be firm and unyielding. Okay, so back to the story. The sages now want to strip Rabbi Gamliel of his position. Having agreed to remove Rabbi Gamliel, they asked, whom shall we appoint in his place? Shall we appoint Rabbi Yeshua? That would not be appropriate because he is the one to whom the story happened. It would seem like he's self-serving, right? Right. He was the entire reason that Rabbi Gamliel was deposed. So appointing him as the new Nasi will cause Rabbi Gamliel too much anguish. Shall we appoint Rabbi Akiva? We cannot do that, for perhaps Rabbi Gamliel will cause punishment to befall him because he does not have the merit of righteous forefathers. Rabbi Akiva was a convert, right? Since he was a convert, he didn't have the merit of his forefathers to protect him from the evil eye that potentially might be cast upon him by Rabbi Gamliel, who might be upset. Perhaps Rabbi Gamliel, in his anguish, is being replaced, will cry out to Hashem, will cause his replacement, Rabbi Akiva, to die, since Rabbi Akiva did not have the merit of righteous ancestors to protect him. Rather, let us appoint Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah. Have you heard of this character, Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah?
Yes.
From where?
In the Haggadah.
That's right. This is the story of where it comes from. When you read about Rabbi Lazar, you remember the story, Chuck, in the Haggadah about a guy who says, I'm like 70 years old.
Right.
You remember
He
such a
was
story?
like 17.
He was really 18 years old. And he says, I am like 70 years old. This is the story. It's him. Rather, let us appoint Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah, who has all the qualifications necessary for the position of Nasi, for he is wise, he is rich, and he is a 10th generation descendant from Ezra the scribe. You know who Ezra the scribe was? Ezra the scribe was one of the sages of the Jewish people at the time of the construction of the second temple. He was the leader of the Jewish people when leading them out of Iran, Persia, back to Jerusalem for the construction of the second temple. So this is now a direct descendant. He's got pedigree, he's got money, he's got wisdom. The importance of these attributes for the position of Nasi is explained. He is wise, so that if he's asked difficult questions, he can answer them. He is rich, so that if he's needed to deal with the house of the Roman Caesar, like political position, he too, like Rabbi Gamliel, will be able to deal with them. In other words, he's familiar with the ways of the rich, and he's not afraid, he's not intimidated. And he is a 10th generation descendant from Ezra, so that he possesses the merit of the righteous forefathers, and Rabbi Gamliel will therefore be unable to cause him punishment. The story continues. They came and they said to him, to Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah, would the master be willing to become the head of the Mesivta? There's a coup going on, right? Would you be willing to take over the leadership? You want to become the head rabbi? He said to them, I will go and consult the members of my household. He went and consulted with his wife. Okay. I just want to welcome all of our viewers here online. We have Corey, I think, and Keith. Keith from St. Thomas, very nice. Stacy and Marty from New York. Yetz the Yager, I think, from Holland. Thomas Jefferson from Norway. Terry Atlanta. This is great. We've got a beautiful international group here. Fran Marks from Northern Florida. Warren Ellick is up in Norfolk, Virginia. Juana is in Westchester. And Thomas Winnan is new with us from South Carolina. Look at that. We got like an international class going on over here. Oh, and we got somebody. Which flag is that? It's like a white flag with a red cross. Which flag is that, Mike? Is that Sweden? I don't know. I'm not familiar. Okay, fine. Anyways, let's see what happens. What is the wife going to tell him? What's going on over here today, guys? So the wife, what's the wife going to tell him? He's asking his wife if he should become the head of the academy. Maybe one day, she said to him, maybe one day they will remove you from office as well, just as they removed Rabbi Gamliel. So in other words, she says, listen, you really want this position? Oh, that's England? Oh my God. I didn't realize that's England. That's funny. Forgive me. I didn't realize. Maybe it was too small for me to recognize. Okay. No, whatever. All right. She said that maybe one day they'll remove you from office as well, just as they removed Rabbi Gamliel. In other words, she says to him, I'm worried that you too will be humiliated, like Rabbi Gamliel is being humiliated. Be careful. He said to her, there's a saying, let a man use an expensive glass cup for one day, and the next day let it break. In other words, the saying goes, enjoy your good furniture, your good equipment while you can, even though you might not have it tomorrow. If I have the opportunity to serve in the position of Nasi now, let me do that and not worry about the future. She said to him, but you do not have white hair. That's what she said to him. You don't have white hair. You don't have seniority. And it's important for a leader to be old so that people will respect him. You need to have white hair in order for people to respect you? Is this true?
No.
Welcome to Palm Beach, where people are dyeing their hair in order to not look like they're white, right? That's interesting. Clearly, this was a different culture. Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah was just 18 years old that day. Can you imagine what a genius this guy must have been? He was actually 17 or 18. There's two versions. One opinion even says that he was 13. But here it says that he's 18. He was 18 years old. And here goes. A miracle occurred to him. And 18 rows of his hair turned white so that he would appear old. Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah, 18 strands of hair, I think it was that night, that transformed him into looking like he was old. And that's when the Haggadah begins. That's when the Haggadah begins when it's it enters the story and says, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, behold, I am like 70 years old. What do you mean you're like 70 years old? Either you are or you're not. Make up your mind. What he meant to say was, I'm going to explain this to you Kabbalistically in a moment. What he meant to say was, I am 18 years old, but I look like I'm 70 years old. Kabbalistically, our Kabbalists tell us that something interesting happened to him. He didn't feel worthy of taking this position. But then a spirit of another soul entered into him. A spirit of a very famous leader of Israel, a soul. This was not reincarnation. Now, this would be like some sort of like a soul pregnancy where the soul attaches. The soul of someone who died at the age of 52 years old. His name was Samuel the prophet. Samuel the prophet passed away at the age of 52 years old. He was Shmuel. He was one who appointed King Saul and also King David. Samuel the prophet, the son of Hannah, right? We read about him on his birth and fertility on the first day of Rosh Hashanah in the Haftarah. Samuel the prophet's soul entered into the body of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. So now what happens is, beyond just a superficial transformation of his beard hairs, what happened was that the soul of a 52-year-old Samuel the prophet enters into the body of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who's now 18 years old. It's 18 plus 52. 70 years old. And that, do you mind doing that? Just clicking the pen is throwing me off. Thanks. 18 plus 52 is 70 years old. Right? So that, again, it's not in the Talmud, that little piece I just shared with you. That's a Kabbalistic. Remember, every layer of Torah that we learn, everything we learn in Torah has different layers, which are deeper and deeper. And that's just a bit of a depth over here. This is the meaning of what Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said in the Mishnah. I'm like 70 years old. He said he was like 70 years old, but not that he was 70 years old because he only appeared old, but he was actually very young. Now, it's kind of interesting that he chose that number 70, but in light of the Kabbalistic explanation, it kind of makes sheds a little light on that situation. Now, I just want to share with you, just to apply that idea. And by the way, Mickey, good morning. I don't think that's the regular flag of England. I think that's like one of the other regions of England. The white and the red line.
St. George's flag of England. Yeah.
Is that the regular? Is that the flag of Great Britain?
Not the UK flag.
That's what I meant. It's not the UK flag. Okay, I think that's the one they use at the soccer matches.
St. George.
Right. Okay. Fine. So
We don't call it St. George.
whatever. So back to the story here. I want to mention to you that sometimes you find yourself in a position where you need to take over. You need to step into the shoes of those who came before you.
Yeah.
And you don't feel worthy, you don't feel capable. I often think about the story of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah having been infused with the soul of a great man who lived before him, that gave him the courage and the character and the tools that he needed in order to rise to that new position. That maybe it can happen that when you need to step into those shoes, for example, if the patriarch of a family passes away now, so you need to rise into that position, then maybe, or rising into running a business or a community or something, maybe there could be another soul that's attaching. It's an idea that we're learning, we often learn about in Tanya. Anyways, let's see what happens. So the Gemara continues telling about the appointment of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah as Nasi. How are we doing over here, Chuck, so far? Are you with me in the story? You good with the story so far or not? Your questions? Okay.
I'm going to ask at the end, what's the message? Because I'm
What's the
following you.
Okay, well, Chuck.
I'm not getting a message.
Okay,
Yeah,
fine.
we're waiting.
Well, Chuck, I want you to know.
Maybe at the end, you'll tell me.
We're all being paid.
Okay, fine. So let's just do a little. Let's just go. It's so late. Let's just go just a drop further. The Gemara continues telling us about the appointment of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah as a Nasi. Bryce said that day. This day in Talmud is known as that day. Anytime in the Talmud they refer to that day, they're talking about this day. This day when Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was appointed. That day on which Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah became Nasi, there was a new sheriff in town, and he changed the rules. They removed the doorkeeper from the entrance of the base medrash of the house of study, and permission was granted for all the students to enter because Rabbi Gamliel, during the period that he was Nasi, would proclaim and say, any student whose interior is not like his exterior, that is, anyone who studies Torah but does not possess the fear of heaven, may not enter the base medrash, may not enter the house of study. When Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah became Nasi, he removed the guard from the door and allowed anyone who wished to enter the house of study. Now, there's other things that happened that day. I'm not going to go into them, but I want to talk about just what just happened over here. First of all, does anybody remember the story of Hillel? Hillel the sage. You've heard of Hillel? Yes. Hillel the sage was a very, very, very poor man. and he desired to study Torah. So what happened was that he would go to the yeshiva to study, and he would, you have to pay like an admission fee, like a nickel or something, or a dime,
Cover charge.
something, a cover charge. But one day he didn't have the money. He didn't have the coin. He would go to work for a little while, make some money for food and for admission, and he would go to the yeshiva for the rest of the day. I have an uncle who's a carpenter in Jerusalem. He's like a old school carpenter. And I once saw him closing his store at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I said, Uncle Tzvi, why are you closing the store? He says, what do you mean? I made enough money for today. I'm good. I'll go home. I have enough food for dinner. I'm going home.
That's old school.
I'm good. I was like, wow, that's awesome.
That's beautiful.
So that's why.
Did you keep the store open later when you didn't make enough money?
Step there.
So this guy, Hillel didn't have one. The one day it was raining.
Exactly.
He didn't have enough money because nobody was hiring him. So he goes to the yeshiva. He's like, can I get in for free? And they said, no, get out of here. So what does he do? He goes up to the roof and he's listening from the skylight. He's like eavesdropping onto the class because he wants to listen from the skylight. The problem is it was snowing. And the snow was packing up, but he was so engrossed in the lecture that he wasn't noticing the snow. Turns out that after a while, a few hours, the sages inside said, it's really dark up there. I don't know what happened to our window. Can somebody go check it out? They went up and they found the half-dead body of Hillel, right? Who was basically freezing to death because of his act of self-sacrifice to study Torah. So they're like, whoa, bring him out. And, they were there, revived him. And from that day on, they allowed him free admission into the yeshiva. They're like, this guy, let him in. Okay. Anyways, but just shows you that there was this admission fee, right? About coming into the shul. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah removed that admission fee. Can you imagine we had an admission fee coming into shul? Imagine to come to morning minyan, $18, right? What would happen? What would happen? Our chairman.
You wouldn't lose anybody. I would
We
hope.
might get more.
Oh,
I think we get more because he was like, oh, there's a value. Imagine it was $180 to come for minyan. Imagine every day $180. What would happen? Mike, what would happen?
Well, I'm good. Not to do the math, but I would meet the Meiser obligation.
Oh, you would meet the Meiser. But okay, fine. So you're allowed to use Meiser funds. That's good, tithe funds. But think about that. Would this give
why
us
would you-
more or less?
Why would you
Right?
get more?
Because people would associate a value with it. You pay peanuts, you get monkeys, right?
No, I understand that.
Anyways, I'm just trying to give you an example of what happened over here. I'm giving an example. What happened over here? That there was, there was this transfer of power. One more thing I want to tell you is that fascinating. Do you realize what Rabbi Gamliel said? Now we'll give you a little lesson to take home with you. One lesson. Rabbi Gamliel said, any student whose interior is not like his exterior may not enter the base medrash. What does that mean?
Inauthentic.
His inside is not like his outside?
Yeah. Yeah, it's inauthentic.
What would you prefer? Your outside to be like your inside or your inside to be like your outside? What do you prefer?
Outside to be like your inside.
That's what it should say, right? So whoever is outside is not like his inside is not welcomed. But he didn't say that. Look closely at the words. He said, whoever's inside is not like his outside. What, pray tell, is he talking about? He's like, we only welcome fakers over here, is what he's saying. We want everybody to be, no, he didn't really say fakers. He's basically saying that your inside needs to match your outside. What that means is like this. It seems like an inappropriate emphasis on external and superficial representations. You would think that in the house of study, what's more important is your inner character, right? Well, you'd think that what's more important is the content of their character more than the color of their skin, right? That's what you would think, right? You would think that that's more important. I have a dream, says Rabbi Gamliel, that they would emphasize the color of the skin over the content of the character. That's what he's saying. He seems to be indicating his dream that all people inside of the academy will be of the right color instead of the right content. That's what he seems to be implying, right? Not?
However, yes, that's what he's
Argue with me. Tell me.
implying.
What?
Seems to be implying that the one is always a reflection of the other.
Okay,
One is
so which one is
deficient and the other
dominant?
deficient.
Which one is dominant?
Well,
Which one?
What do
more
you think?
essential?
What do you think is more
The interior
essential?
animal.
What?
Interior.
Of course, the interior, right? But he doesn't make it that sound like that. He says that the interior has to match the exterior.
yeah, we've also learned
Right.
you act as if. exterior shows up eventually.
Okay, I'm trying to build up the question before you give me the answer here. Hold on a second.
That was the punch.
Okay, fine, I get it. So you're like the guy, the rabbi's trying to say a joke, and there's always one guy that knows the punchline, right? There's always one, but inevitably, the guy that knows the punchline inevitably always messes it up because the timing's off, right? So whatever. Yeah, I'm joking. We're shield bearers here, right? Okay, good. Anyway, so back to the story here. So let's first understand the question before we get to the answer. So what's shocking here is that Rabbi Gamliel seems to be de-emphasizing the internal component, the character, and seems to be overemphasizing the external component, which is our superficial self. Now, this makes no sense in my opinion, and if not for the teachings of Hasidus that we as a group have already learned many times. We've learned a discourse called Garments of the Soul. It's here somewhere. Garments of the Soul. I have a lecture series on it on YouTube called Garments of the Soul. It's actually from this week's Torah portion. Vayishlach Yehoshua. It's this week's Haftarah, which is that teaching. And it talks about how, without getting too much into the details over there, it talks about how we have garments of our soul, which are thought, speech, and action. And we have the essence of our soul, which is our emotions. Our emotions, and we have our expressions. Now, you think that what's more important is your emotions, and your expressions are sort of subordinate to your emotions. But no, Hasidus teaches us that fake it until you make it. That how you act on the outside influences and transforms how you are on the inside. This is a radical, transformational concept. Radical concept. It's a concept of fake it until you make it. People will try to say, Rabbi, I don't want to lay tefillin. You know why I don't want to lay tefillin? Because I'm not feeling it, Rabbi. That's why I don't want to lay tefillin. I don't want to keep Shabbos. I don't want to daven because I don't feel it. Comes the Torah and says, don't worry about feeling it. What you need to worry about is doing it. Thought, speech, and action. Wear the jacket. Put on the garments of the soul on the outside, and that's what will draw the feeling to the forefront. The feeling is a result of external action, not the cause of external action. And that's the profundity of Rabban Gamliel, who says, when it comes to my students, I need you to emphasize your external. Your inside must match your outside. Now, why does he exclude people whose inside does not match their outside? Because if your character has not transformed as a result of your external behavior, what does that mean? It means that your external behavior is incomplete. That's what it means. It means that you're not actually doing it right. Because if you were doing it right, if you were doing the deed, then you're like a wellspring. The emotions would well up within you. This is a profound concept, folks. I'm going to end it over here. I hope that just a closing thought here. The Talmud is an ocean of wisdom. And you'll notice it's a different style of study where you're not like every day experiencing sermonic ideas that are inspirational, takeaway, bite-sized packages. What you're doing is you're covering the foundation of Judaism here. So we're laying foundations here to be able to, identify. Let me think about what I'm identifying. To be able to identify the foundations upon which the sermons are built. So think of this as fundamental study. I called it last time foundations of faith, as opposed to expressions of faith. Think of the Talmud as the roots of the tree, and the sermons are the little fruits that you pick off the tree. So the sermons are delicious, tasty, inspirational takeaways. But you can't really have the sermons if you don't have the roots. The roots are underground. It's kind of dirty. They're not so clean, right? Go ahead.
When I was in business, when we were involved in a lot of changing companies and inside, there was always a theory that I remember, change the mind and you'll change behavior, because ultimately we wanted to, right? But I and others kind of always believe, interestingly, that it's a lot the way to really change the mind is first change the behavior, because it's easier to change.
Oh, you believed.
It's easier to change behavior there's the mind. So thought, speech, and action.
Well, all three. I would say one more thing. I would say one more part. You said change your mind.
Yeah.
Well, all the two things, Chuck. You said change your mind, change your behavior, and you said change your.
Well,
Change your
behavior,
first.
thought, speech, and action.
Oh, change your
And
mind, then you'll change your behavior. That's what they
change-
said.
No,
Right?
no. Change the behavior. Like what you just said.
Action,
What
action.
You just said.
Change your
fake
behavior.
Fake it until.
Good.
Change the behavior.
Yeah,
Which
and
will ultimately change your mind.
then was the second aphorism.
That was
That's
it.
it.
That was it.
Okay, but I say change your words,
Well,
Same
that's
thing.
thought,
and you'll
speech,
change your
action.
world.
Change your habits.
I
Thought,
know,
speech, and action.
but I'm saying that it's all three
Yes,
platforms.
thought, speech, and
Thought, speech, and action. Right.
Right? So
Yeah.
It's consistent.
I just want to bid farewell to our viewers right now.
Hopefully you'll buy into
I want-
it.
Those who are still there.
I just want to bid farewell. No, we got quite a strong viewership, and we have a friend from Kentucky, Deborah here from Kentucky. Thomas Jefferson just purchased the book. Is that going to Norway? Are you shipping the book to Norway? Is that how it works? Thank you, Fran. Appreciate it. Good. So I just want to bid farewell because I am actually heading out of town. Today is Thursday. Next week, I'm not going to be here. And for most of the month of July, I don't think I'm going to be here. So I'm going to wish you all farewell. But the other Rabbi Uzvalk will be here, God willing, and he will continue our daily Torah studies. But I'm going away for a few weeks to refresh
Sabbatical.
and recharge. Got to recharge the batteries a little bit.
There you go.
And then, God willing, come back rejuvenated, spelled J-E-W. Over and out. Shalom. You can always send me an email to rabbijewishgardens.com. That's rabbijewishgardens.com. I'm here for Shem. I'm leaving Sunday.